my name is Lynn and I am studying to be a B.C.B.A. The next course within my first semester was BEH 5044, or Ethics, Intro to Ethics at the very least. This was a 3-unit class. They tack it on to the other class that I had taken previously so that you only focus on one class at a time. So even though I'm signed up for 3 classes per semester, they have the experience class, which happens the entire semester, and then they have a main focus class, and then they have the last class that's usually only 3 units. So that's the structure of FIT. This one happens to be ethics. So this will only be 3 units, so hopefully it'll be a bite-sized morsel. So unit 1 of ethics is basically introduction to ethics and the responsible conduct of a behavior analyst. It first addresses what is ethics, and the most basic description of ethics for behavior analysis is the rule of conduct and behavior based on what is considered morally right. Now, this is the most subjective point of behaviorism, or I should say behavior analysis, because we generally try to focus on measurable, quantifiable items, and we don't like to go into mentalisms or theological explanations behind things. But ethics definitely has a very subjective feel to it, both in the world of ABA and just in general, right? It's why law can be so complicated. So because of that, they've tried to streamline the ethics into a very understandable and very structured way. And the B.C.B.A does have a board of ethics that they basically rule on whether or not conduct is appropriate or inappropriate if they receive any reports of possible inappropriate conduct. The 3 fundamental questions addressed by ethical behavior, so to speak, according to ABA, is what is the right thing to do? What is worth doing? And what does it mean to be a good behavior analyst? See what I mean by it's pretty subjective? Because good, I mean, it's kind of intangible, right? So they have to have certain structures and an entire section that is explaining what is expected of us, and they give a lot of examples throughout the unit of what is and what isn't representative of good ethics within our field. The prime directive of the ethics board, so to speak, would be to do no harm. Now there's 9 ethical principles that follow. The first ethical principle is do no harm. That is our prime directive. It's what everything is based off of. The second is respect autonomy. So of course, when we are working with humans, we are dealing with people, so we have to respect people's autonomy. The third is make sure that when you are helping, you are benefiting others. So you're not trying to just get ahead within your own self, like you're trying to actually help others. 4 and 5 I feel kind of go hand in hand, but 4 is to be just and 5 is to be honest or be truthful. I feel like they work together because if you're being just, you're also being very honest about what's happening. So I feel like those work together. The way they list these are a little confusing, so I'm trying to explain what each mean, because number 6 is according dignity, which basically describes treat everyone with dignity, not just your clients, but the other professionals you're working with. Just because what they say or what they teach is not in strict alignment with ABA doesn't mean that what they have is non-consequential or what they're explaining doesn't apply to your client. It could very well benefit them. So it's according dignity to who you work with and what you're working with. 7 is treat others with care and compassion. Pretty self-explanatory. 8 is pursuit of excellence. So ABA is a very young field still. So in a pursuit of excellence, we want to make sure that we are acting on our best behavior and fighting what is a very real strong stigma of negative history, so to speak. We have a really rough history because we even reference Pavlov, and so people have compared our methods as Pavlovian, cold, inhumane, because Pavlov dealt with dogs, he didn't deal with people, and so it's kind of a difference of perspective. So we need to always be able to explain ourselves, and in that we are doing so in pursuit of excellence. The 9th, and what I would consider the most important, is accept responsibility, and that kind of goes with pursuit of excellence. Is everything we do, we have to be able to explain ourselves, which is why we're considered such a natural science. We are doing things based off of data. We're not just like feeling like we can do things, and nor do we approach behavior with a one-size-fits-all approach. We understand that every aspect of behavior is unique to the individual who is behaving and their environment that is kind of evoking that behavior. So it's not like oh, that's aggression, here's a quick way to solve aggression, or oh, here's a really good way of increasing compliance. There has to be functionality, there has to be assessment, there has to be tangible, quantifiable observation, essentially. If you're not taking data, you're not doing behavior analysis. So we accept responsibility for everything that we're doing, and we can explain ourselves because of that. These 9 ethical principles are based off of 4 very important documents throughout the world of science, not just ABA. The first one is a reference to the ethical principles of psychology. Even though some would say that ABA is not psychology and others would argue that it is, if we do any sort of experimentation, we do still have to follow similar ethics as they would in psychology, because psychology also studies humans. The second document is a document titled Right to Effective Treatment, which is basically the autonomy and dignity of the clients being pretty much the forefront of what we focus on. So basically, they have a right to effective treatment. So we can't just go in and say like, oh, I think it's this, so let's try this, right? It has to be, once again, conceptually systematic, right? And it has to be based off of things that we know. And if we are experimenting, we have to do so with dignity and recognize that we have an impact on the people we are working on. So ethics behind it, right? The third one is a document called Right to Effective Education. So this kind of works together with Right to Effective Treatment, but this is basically, once again, the dignity of the client being subject to the fact that we need to be able to provide correct education to them. And it is a right to everyone to receive proper education. That's where some of these ethical principles pull from. The last document, and the main document that is focused on throughout this entire unit, is called the Professional and Ethical Compliance Code for Behavior Analysts. And that is just called the code in ABA. If anyone says like, oh, I don't know if that follows the code, that is the document they are referring to. It is a list of standards and conditions and explanations of what is expected of a good behavior analyst. It is always being amended because it does address certain issues. For instance, recently I had a meeting where my manager asked, is it acceptable for us to go in the home and if the mom offers us a glass of water, are we allowed to accept it according to the code? Now, I know that recently the code had an addendum, so there was kind of discussion over it because a lot of people were like, oh no, we're not allowed to accept it. And I said, yes, we are, technically speaking. And my manager was like, oh, actually the answer is no, because we're not allowed to accept gifts. And I was like, yeah, but there's an addendum recently that would be in effect, if not immediately, at least by next year, 2022. And she was like, oh, well, that's true, actually. There was an addendum coming out, but it's still in the process of being published or being like rewritten. It's tangible, it feels subjective, right? But they are trying to list codes and rewrite codes to address cultural sensitivity, which is exactly what that would be referencing. The next part of Unit 1 touches on what the main ethics include. So this starts diving into the code. The next 2 units after Unit 1, once again, is just a magnifying glass on certain aspects of the code and explains what's expected of each section. So the first section that they describe is number 1, reliance on scientific knowledge, 2, boundaries of competence. So understanding that an R.B.T cannot write a program, they can only implement a program, and they must be trained correctly to do so. So that is boundaries of competence and knowing your scope. 1.03 was maintaining competence through professional education. So you need to continuously be educated. There's something called continuing education units, or CEUs, that all BCBAs must collect over time in order to maintain their certification. Of course, if you don't want to maintain it, you don't have to have it. I believe you are retested once every 2 years, or the CEUs must add up to a certain amount at that end, but I think I've covered that before in another video, so you can just reference back to that. Beyond that, 1.04 talks about integrity. So integrity would basically mean understanding and knowing what you know and what you don't know, and not trying to act like the professional. And also some simple things like time management. If you don't have enough time to deal with this many clients, should you accept more clients even though you don't have time to do so? Can you actually give them effective treatment that they have a right to? right? The answer to that would be like, you'd probably want to delegate it to someone else and say like, I'm sorry, I don't have the time to do that. It's not that I don't want to, it's just I have a full caseload. 1.05 addresses professional and scientific relationships. What this basically means is within the world of ABA, you're kind of always, usually, right, like 90% of the time, you're going to be working in tandem with a lot of other professionals who are not in your field. Occupational therapists, speech therapists, teachers, different levels of educators, and they may suggest things that are not supported by what we do. Once again, doesn't make it irrelevant. It doesn't mean that it won't work for the client. It just means that we respect other professional and maintain that professional relationship. We don't want to talk down to them, and likewise, we don't want to be talked down to. So we maintain a professional relationship with them. 1.06 is multiple relationships and conflicts of behavior. So basically, you're not allowed to babysit anyone who's your client. You're not allowed to go out for drinks with the parents of a client. You're not supposed to have any multiple relationships, which is what that describes. So you want to make sure that you are only maintaining a professional therapeutic relationship, so to speak, and making sure that you're not like seeing them on the weekends just for fun or whatever. It's maintaining that expectation is what it's supposed to do. It's the whole good neighbors build good fences, where if you babysit, then maybe they'll think, oh, like it blurs the line of like, maybe you can do more treatment during babysitting. Well, okay, are you billing for it? What's happening there? Or worse yet, someone could say like, oh, he's babysitting for this person, so they're getting better treatment, so why can't he babysit my kids? So there's a big slippery slope that can come from that. So you really want to avoid multiple relationships at all costs. It also creates a conflict of interest. What if you do something wrong, like you're exchanging sessions for like guitar lessons or something, and then they don't feel like you're treating their kid that well, and so when you go in for your guitar lesson, they're like, well, today we're just gonna practice one note. And it's like, oh, but I already know that note. It's like, well, I'm the teacher, so this is what I want to do, and I'm not going to give you the quality education that you expect because I'm not seeing progress in my child. There's a huge conflict of interest, right? So there's a lot of issues that are unethical when multiple relationships arise. They delineate 1.06 into multiple subsets to explain like power dynamics and different things that can happen from multiple relationships. So they do put a lot of focus on that one. The last section of Unit 1 covers 1.07, which is exploitative relationships. Once again, falls into that multiple relationship thing, but it was so impactful that they made their own separate section within the ethics code for it. That is all of Unit 1. I hope that that's a bite-sized morsel enough, because I know it kind of introduces a lot, but it's basically just introducing where the ethical standards came from, why we follow them, and the rest of the lectures were basically all examples of what happens when you do it right and what happens when you do it wrong for each of the subsets that I listed. So I will see you in the next video, and until then, take care.